Well, we go to El Salvador, to San Salvador, the capital, where we're joined by Roberto Lovato. His family's from El Salvador. He's a writer and visiting scholar at UC Berkeley's Center for Latino Policy Research. He's been reporting on Archbishop Romero's beatification for The Guardian and Latino rebels. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Roberto, and talk about what happened this weekend.
What happened, Amy, was basically a realization of what Monsignor Romero himself said before he died. We said, because he knew they were going to kill him. That's pretty clear from talking to people who knew him. He said that if I am killed, I will rise again in the Salvadoran people. And what happened on Saturday was precisely that, in a formal way, because people here will tell you that Romero was a saint for us here long before the church kind of caught up and did the beatification, which was held up by politics that included, for example, the Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Carter administration kind of trying to get Romero's to shut up in the 1980s. And then from there on, the U.S. has not played a very kind of positive role here.
Can you talk about exactly what happened on that day when he was assassinated? Give us the politics of what took place. Who murdered Oscar Romero as he was giving his chapel sermon?
He was giving a chapel sermon in what's known as El Hospitalito, a small chapel near hospital here in San Salvador behind me. And he was, doing what he always does, ministering to the poor. I mean, Romero was nothing if not somebody whose Alpha and Omega began with God and the poor, and he interpreted the gospel in those terms. And so he was talking, and there had already been a plan hatched, Plan Piña, by Roberto Dabuisan and others, because one of the things that happens is people lose the story in thinking that Roberto Dabuisan was the only killer of Monsignor, when in fact there were people in Miami, there were people in different parts of the country who were still around, and still people here wanted to bring him to justice, were plotting his murder. And so a car drove by and an assassin fired a bullet straight into his heart, and he was killed, and he died not long after, and he was tended to by Carmelite nuns. I mean, one of the most touching moments for me here, Amy, during the ceremony on Saturday was to see a Carmelite nun singing a song called Sombrero Azul, which was the kind of anthem of the revolutionary left in El Salvador. And the song says, and let the happiness come and wash away the suffering. And at the end of the song, in the middle of the song, there's a part that says, Dale Salvadoreño, go Salvadoran. And this 4'5" Carmelite nun raises her fists and just had some of us in tears at that point. So Romero challenged the state to stop repressing people. But he went beyond that. I've been reading his homilies, listening to interviews and other things, and he actually his gospel, his message went far beyond simply stopping the repression. He called for example, he supported the nationalization of banks. He talked about los imperialistas, which was pretty much code for the United States, and so. We have someone now who in this country that's now arguably the most violent country on earth in terms of homicides, becoming this massive symbol of peace. It couldn't have come at a better time for El Salvador.
And Roberto, can you talk more about the politics behind this decision, taking so long for this honor to happen, and what this now means for El Salvador?
Well, you have basically the tale of two churches. I was on the weekend before the beatification. I was at a church at the cathedral, and if you go to the cathedral, you see the tale of two churches playing out. On the top, you had a traditional mass that barely even mention Romero, being led by the Archbishop of San Salvador, the current Archbishop. Below, in the crypt of Romero, you had hundreds of people crammed up into this humid room, basically with carrying pictures of their martyrs, carrying pictures of Romero, celebrating, singing, and talking about justice and God in one voice. And so that's kind of the tale of two churches here. And so you have the conservative church hierarchy and the elites, those that have continued the oligarchy from the 1980s have been expanded into the financial sector, have joined forces to pressure the Vatican to not beatify Romero. They sent letters. They did what the U.S. has been doing while Romero was alive. Fortunately, that didn't work. And as my friend Carlos Dada, a prominent journalist who wrote a good piece in the New Yorker, said, he said that, you know, this is a moral victory for El Salvador. So in terms of what it means for El Salvador, it means it's a moral victory. It's a validation that, you know, your dead were there with Romero. There were people, they read the names of the martyrs that have died. Church people, non-church people, you know, 80,000 dead, 95% of whom were killed by the U.S.-backed government, according to the United Nations Truth Commission.
Roberto Lovato, we have to leave it there, but I want to thank you for being with us. Writer and visiting scholar at UC Berkeley Center for Latino Policy Research. We'll link to his reports at democracynow.org. Speaking to us from San Salvador, I'm Amy Goodman.